Hello, everyone. Just introducing myself, and we're really excited to have you all here. Congratulations for signing up, whether you came up as a Crest Club member or as a L'École member into the mix.
Can I interrupt this briefly? Happy birthday, Constance.
Oh.
Wow. Happy birthday,
39,
Constance.
happy birthday, 39 again. 39 again for the 8th time. So
Oh, yeah.
That's fun. Thank you, Marty. Cheers. I'm lucky to have a great glass of wine. So it would be a spring release weekend happening now, and we'd be welcoming a lot of you. And whether you visit L'École or Woodward, you always make your way across the yard so that we get a chance to see a lot of people. But now we're replacing that with this opportunity to see you all. But I'm Constance, and I wanted to introduce you to Jordan Dunsmall, right there, waving, who's going to, with me, kind of throw some questions at Rick and Marty to keep it moving. And we have some questions, but we'll keep an eye on any pertinent questions you guys might have as well. Rick, where is he? There's Rick Small. So these are two great legends, Marty and Rick. If they won't say so themselves, then I will. But you've got some of the best here of not just Walla Walla, but of Washington State and of the wine world, I think. These are pioneering guys in the entire wine world. So it's super exciting and a unique opportunity to be here together. So there's Rick Small. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
Yep, we got some hard questions to ask you, but I think you'll manage. And Jordan is going to help with taking us through today. I'm going to start and ask Rick, we'll start back in the roots. Rick, how did you first come to put down vines in Walla Walla Valley? What's the story behind that? And how did the AVA come to?
Sure, I'll do that. And I'm, like I said, hi, everybody. First of all, for those that are part of the Woodward Canyon Club and have already heard some of this, forgive me. But most of them will know, but I'm 5 generations on my mother's side of the family in Walla Walla Valley agriculture. And I am 3 generations on my dad's side of the family right here in Loudon. So I actually attended Loudon School. I went to grade school there, grades 1 through 6, and then went through the Walla Walla school system. And so, but I think the point I want to try to make is that I am actually right from here. I'm from here. I grew up in Walla Walla agriculture. And after I went to university, I went to Washington State University, and about that time, wine grapes were starting to be planted in Washington State, and during that same time, I actually had to fulfill my military obligation, join the Army Reserve, and during that period in time, I actually met Gary Figgins, and so of course we were drinking wine and got to be better and better friends. He was planting a vineyard, and so I started to help him basically, and I loved it. I enjoyed the concept of growing something and like a plant or a grape or something like that, and then actually having the ability to go ahead and also make wine out of it. And so Figgins and I obviously became very, very good friends. And so this was in the early 70s. And I think probably I made a note here, but probably by about 1975, I knew I was going to have a vineyard. I knew I was going to plant. And so in 78, we actually planted our first grapes, but we had land available. We were wheat farmers. And my father told me I could go plant 1 acre of grapes out on this very shallow soil, which basically was just nothing but basalt, shallow basalt, or fractured basalt, but with very shallow silt loams and windblown musk soils on. And so anyway, that's where the first vineyard went into. And so then we just planted a little more over time. But it was pretty much my exposure to Gary and our home winemaking days and doing all of that we just had a blast. And it was a great deal of fun. And to kind of take on the second part of that question, actually, Constance, the AVA was actually actually drawn up and written mostly by Darcy. And she should be the one that's actually talking about this and not me. But she had a land use and geography background, and we weren't, all of us in Walla Walla at the time were not willing or not comfortable enough financially to probably hire some kind of consultant or a professor, or soil, a geologist or something like that to come in and do all the research. So we did it all ourselves. And I think there were probably if it comes to mind and I'm thinking about it, it was probably Lacole 41 and Leonetti and Seven Hills and probably Woodward Canyon was probably about it at those days. And so Becky Hendricks helped Darcy, and basically we wrote the appellation. I'm reminded of one story when Figgins and I one day decided that this was in about 1982. We grabbed a 6-pack of beer and jumped in his pickup and drove all the way around what we envisioned to be the Walla Walla Valley appellation at that time. And we just had a blast. We drank all the beer, which was wonderful, but it took us about 3 or 4 hours to do it. And, you know, we enjoyed it. But anyway, that was initially submitted in 1982 and ultimately approved in 1984. And it was the second appellation in Washington State, 1 year after Yakima Valley.
Yeah, so you were making wine before it was an appellation, and Lacole also just right at that time started.
Absolutely, yeah. Happened right in between, right during.
So speaking of the frontiers of the AVA, we sent a map ahead with the link for today's Zoom, and you could see the map of Walla Walla Valley, and you could see how the Woodward Canyon vineyard is positioned on one extremity versus the Lacole Estate vineyards. They're certainly on opposite ends of the valley. Well, it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I would say, Constance, about the appellation is when we first submitted it, it's been adjusted one time, but when we first submitted it, we actually submitted it on a little bit larger, grander scale. And ATF in those days actually fired back a letter saying, well, there isn't that many grapes in Walla Walla yet. So they made us make it smaller. And so then when later on, there was a request to get some of the vineyards in out north, further north out of Walla Walla. And so then we actually had a meeting to decide whether to accept that or not. And so by Norman Derry, and actually then it was adjusted and sized up larger. Then we resubmitted it and it was approved. But I think we all agreed at that point to have your vineyards in the Walla Walla Valley means that there's an economic impact to that, a good one. And so we had to be concerned that there's still drainages pretty much were all going to be still in what was be considered historically Walla Walla Valley.
So, Constance, okay. I think I'll jump in and try to tie in a connection to Lacole. So many of you know that Lacole and Woodward Canyon are next door neighbors, and having Rick next door has been a 30 plus year delight on my part because he's been a great wine counselor and a good friend. And Megan and I and Rick and Darcy get together often for dinner and sharing wine. And we're going to share some of our adventures together kind of later in this thing. But Rick was close to Meg's parents, Gene and Baker Ferguson, who founded Lacole in it was 1983 when they first started, but they bought the old schoolhouse actually in 1977. And so it was a multi-year work in progress. And I think they lived in the school building, and Rick would come over and actually help them a few times in their first harvest. Do you have any favorite stories about that, Rick?
Well, they were great neighbors, Marty. And I have one that I got to be brief because I want to hear what you've got to say as well. But there was one wonderful time when Gene was away, and Baker called me and said, look, Rick, I always told Baker, I said, if you ever need help, just call me. Just ring me and I'll come over and I'll help you. It doesn't matter what. And so one day I got a wonderful call. I said, I dropped everything and ran over there and to help him out. And I didn't realize at the time what he really needed, though, but he needed me to be the ballast on the back of his forklift to go down into the bottom of the cellar underneath the winery. And he had a big load on the front of it, and it was just a little bit too heavy, and he needed a little bit of extra way to
Some
put on
expertise.
there. And like I told Marty later, I said I realized and I finally appreciated what my true value was, as to be some extra dead weight on the back of the so, but it's one of my best stories ever about Baker, and I just crack up every time I start thinking about it. So they're wonderful, wonderful neighbors. And what Marty said about our relationship was absolutely true. We watch Super Bowls together, and we just have a wonderful time together. They're great next door neighbors.
That's awesome. Would you speak to us a little more about your vineyard? You talked about its basalts and the Ice Age flood silts, I guess.
Yeah.
And
yeah, sure.
If we could see that photo again, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, this is kind of up on the ridge top, and I think what I'm looking at that, it looks like it is the Sauvignon Blanc, and then with Cab Franc and Merlot right next. But yeah, it gets about 12 inches of rainfall a year, and elevation runs from about 650 feet to about 870 feet. And obviously the basalt there, because we're the lowest operating vineyard in Walla Walla Valley, it is the oldest. It's ancient, and we think somewhere around 25 million years or something like this. Horribly, horribly old. Ritzville and Ellisford silt loams, which was all pretty much flood silts that came in during the glacial flooding. And then there's about a meter or around three feet of windblown loess, which is the very light powdery soil that's up on top. And some of this basalt that you have underneath, and a lot of you, if you've ever been to Walla Walla and you've gone through these basalt areas where the basalt is shallow and near the surface, you'll have a lot of moisture leaching down through that loess, and it creates this little white crust on all these dark basalt rocks, and that's calcium carbonate. And so a lot of our roots, that probably is applicable to Ferguson just as much as it is to Woodward Canyon, even though we're in different places, we're both on basalt. And so I think that this calcium carbonate contributes to some of the characteristics that we see at Woodward Canyon. Plant spacing wise, we're about 1,600 plants per acre, which is about a 3x9 spacing. And on average, we're going to shoot for between 2 and 3 tons per acre. As this relates this particular vineyard to some of the style of wine that we can make at Woodward Canyon, especially Walla Walla, I think the wines are earth driven. Definitely sense of place. And I'm trying both local wines here right now, and I still get it. No matter on which side of the valley, I still get it. I think the wines stylistically are more European. And of course, I like that. I get notes of black olive sometimes, nice dark black fruits, but maybe a little more restrained. Think about a Napa Valley Cab, which is huge and got all this unctuous dark black fruit. I don't think our Walla Walla wines tend to be that way. I get lead pencil, I get notes of graphite, cigar box, dried herbs. They're always going to be wonderful with food. And the ultimate wonderful thing about it is it's how well the wines age. I mean, my favorite Walla Walla wines are always ones that I've given 5 to 10 years to wait on, and we'll be able to compare that a little bit later on. But that's what our vineyard contributes in the kind of flavors and profile that I see at our wines.
Nice. Jordan, I'm going to unmute you if we can. There she is.
All right, cool. Sorry, I got waylaid by some little kids.
Oh, those kids.
That's okay.
Yes.
All right, so has Marty had a chance to talk about his estate vineyards yet?
Not yet.
Okay, cool. So Marty, I know you guys work with Seven Hills and Ferguson, so if you could, just give us a rundown on those and what's so special about those locations, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks, Jordan.
Yeah.
So here I am at the gazebo at Seven Hills Vineyard. Not really. It's a picture of Seven Hills behind me, but it's about this bright in Walla Walla right now, so it kind of feels right. It's a beautiful day, so it looks like I could be in the vineyard. So we are, when I got involved at L'Ecole with Megan in 1989, and at that time, there was actually very few grapes grown in the valley. Rick had his vineyard, Mary Figgins had a vineyard, small, and Seven Hills Vineyard had been planted in 1980, but but in 1989, I think there was clearly less than 100 acres. It might have been less than 50. And so at that point in time, we really didn't have any fruit from Walla Walla. We were trucking out to the Pasco Basin and buying fruit and bringing it in. And so I really wanted, as I got involved in the winery, we wanted to start making wines from Walla Walla. And so I became really good friends with Norm McKibben, who had started Pepperbridge Vineyard. Actually, even before that, he had started a vineyard called Whiskey Creek that we had a handle in. And Norm and I started talking about doing a vineyard together. And then it turned out that the original families involved in Seven Hills Vineyard, the McClellan and Hendricks, Casey McClellan runs Seven Hills Winery, they sold the vineyard to Norm. It was about a 20-acre vineyard at that time. And Gary Figgins at Leonetti and myself became partners with Norm, and we expanded Seven Hills Vineyard up to what it is today, which is about 170 acres. So it's a very, not only was it one of the first vineyards, but it's probably one of the most prominent. It was named by Wine and Spirits magazines as one of the 10 great vineyards in the world in 2004. There are a number of wineries that produce wines, and L'Ecole makes a slew of wines. Not just, we make the Bordeaux blend Perigee, our fruit, we use it in our estate Merlot, the Walla Walla Cab, we do an estate Syrah, the white blend Luminettes, which is Semillon Sauvignon Blanc. So it's a very significant contribution to our whole program. And then quickly, the Seven Hills sits on the edge of a big vineyard development called Savain. And within Savain, we have a new property. It's not so new anymore, that we named after Gina Baker Ferguson, called Ferguson Vineyard. And Ferguson sits at a fairly high elevation for Walla Walla. And it ranges from like 1,350 feet up to just shy of 1,500 feet. And ironically, has a very similar soil profile to the Woodward Canyon estate. Mm-hmm. It's a high enough elevation that it's above the Ice Age floods. You can see a picture right in the middle of your screen, which is the basalt wall at Ferguson. That was actually dug out in order to build the roads, and it exposed this 40, 50 foot high wall of fractured basalt. And you can see sitting on top a very thin layer of windblown loess and vines right behind it. So we planted the first phase of Ferguson in 2008 and expanded in 2009. And many of you know we went on to win the Decanter World Wine Awards in London for the best Bordeaux blend in the world for our 2011 Ferguson, which was a really big deal for us. But Ferguson has gone on to become a really important and highly acclaimed vineyard for us. And so those are our two estate vineyards.
Thank you. What are we drinking today, Marty, Rick?
Okay, well, I have the great privilege to be drinking first the 2016 Estate Grown Perigee, Seven Hills Vineyard, by my good friend, Martin Clubb.
You're drinking my wine?
Thank you, Marty.
What a surprise.
Very surprise.
Would you like me to speak to that a little bit, or are we going to do this a little bit?
Say whatever you want, and then I'll elaborate.
God, it's just showing beautifully, man. Yeah, we were talking about this just a little bit earlier about these wines, Walla Walla wines, especially the ones that are grown in basalt with the windblown loess and all of that. And what I said earlier about their food friendliness and their ability to age is just spot on with this. I'm getting beautiful fruit, great acidity, nice balance. great winemaking, and but I still get some of those nice little earthy notes and some of that herb and some of that really nice. It's the style of wine I love to drink, and it's part of the reason why I love. Even though Walla Walla can be a little bit difficult, especially down in the lower elevations from a frost issue or a freeze issue from time to time, it still seems to me that the ultimate quality of the wines is just worth the fight. And so anyway, I'm delighted. Yeah, beautiful fruit, nice cherries, a little bit of sea, nice.
Yeah, thank you. So the Seven Hills sits about 850 to almost 1,100 feet elevation. And this picture that's behind me was taken from the gazebo right at the top of the vineyard, looking north across the vineyard. You can actually see the wind machines. There's some wind machines. Back in 2004, we did have a winter frost event that caused some damage that year. And that's when we installed most of the wind machines. And ever since we've done that, we've really had a great harvest ever since. So the wind machines made a lot of sense for Seven Hills. And what I love about it now is all of the vines would be considered older vines. I mean, the original vineyard was planted in 1980, expanded in 89, and then the big jump was 97, 98. Well, even the 97, 98 vines are now, 20-year vine age. And so they really show this beautiful maturity and balance, really pretty aromatics in almost every vintage. And you get a little bit of that earthy, dusty tannin level, but the tannins tend to be a little more of a silky structure. And the particular bottle that Rick is trying is a classic Bordeaux blend of Cab, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. But it's Cabernet heavy. It's Cabernet heavy because the Cabernet tends to give it a little more foundational structure. It tends to be the variety that gives it the ageability. And the Merlot is more of the fruitfulness of the wine, that black cherry, blackberry fruit. Cabernet Franc, a little bit more that floral, rose petal, aromatic lift. And then we use a very small percentage of Malbec and Petit Verdot, but they really tend to spice up the wine. The Malbec has kind of this minty mocha mid-palate lift, and the Petit Verdot is kind of this inky blackberry pie fruit that is just kind of right little touch.
Marty, can you explain, when you mentioned that this vineyard is north facing, and as is Ferguson, a lot of wine regions really have a south and southeast facing exposure. What's up with the north facing vineyards in Walla Walla?
Right. So the Walla Walla has an amazing array of different climates, all within a 10, 15 mile range. And that's partly because the Blue Mountains to the east tend to catch the storms, and you have the cooler weather rolling out of the Blue Mountains. So as you move east, you're into cooler growing climate. But on that southern ridge where Seven Hills and Ferguson sit, it's very dry and very warm. And so in a very warm site, sometimes we're actually trying to slow it down. So you typically would have a southern exposure where you're trying to give it a little bit more heat unit. But in the case of Seven Hills, and quite frankly in Ferguson, having a little bit of a north slope actually gives us a little longer extended hang time, and we can harvest the fruit just a little bit later. And we tend to we've planted the vineyard in row orientation, so we get just, it's like 20 degrees off, so we get the morning light on the east side of the canopy tends to balance out with the afternoon sun on the west side of the canopy. So we really do get this uniform ripening. And so not all places would do well with a north slope, but Seven Hills does.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Marty, I have one question. What is the age of these vines probably for this 2016? Just estimate.
Yeah, so I have fruit from the 89 planting, both Merlot and Cabernet, and we have fruit from the 97 planting, and the fruit that tends to make this particular bottling is the highest elevation. So that's like block 2 Cabernet and block 6 Merlot. So it's typically a blend of those blocks.
Yeah, nice.
What are you drinking, Marty?
Well, it just so happens that I have a Woodward Canyon 2017 estate red. Rick, it is quite a delight for me to be able to. Of course, I've tried Woodward Canyon estate wines many times over the years, but it's always a delight. This is my first time to actually try this 2017, and as usual, it's got, you know, really elegant aromatics, a lot of black fruit. You can see how dark and inky it is, kind of plum and earth notes. And that graphite note you were talking about definitely jumps out of the glass. Mm-hmm. But this is a hearty, structured red. And I suspicion that this will be not just a 5 or 10 year wine like you described, but 15, 20, if not longer year wine. And I've had some of those wines that have gone that long, but the aromatics on it are just beautiful. And I smell a little Cab Franc here. So you're going to have to talk to us about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Marty. So basically, both of the reds that we brought are right bank wines stylistically. There's 59% Cabernet Franc in the wine you have right now, 24% Cab Sauv, 12% Petit Verdot, and 5% Merlot. So the vines for this were planted in 1997. So a little bit kind of like the same, roughly same age group as some of the wines that you were talking about at Seven Hills. And this particular 17 was surprising because we had some difficulties with our 2016 vintage. And so as a result, the 17s came in at really, really low yields. So we had a yield of about 1.7 ton per acre here. So I think there's a little bit of the concentration that came from such a low yielding vintage that might not be quite typical of normal vintages like 2018 or 19, where we had a little bit more yield. So, but it's high density, as I said, high density planting. So we're probably only going to take a kilo per plant at the most, which would be a couple pounds, and maybe 1 kilo 5. So 3 pounds. So not a lot of yield, but if you have high density plants, you don't need each plant to grow very much. But this is fun. This is the highest scoring estate red wine we just got scores on. We just got the best scores for it so far. So it remains to be seen. And thankfully, some of the people that are reviewing the wine are at least acknowledging now that these wines do take time and are giving us the benefit of the doubt about that, which is something that they didn't always used to do. And so that is refreshing to see.
Jordan told me that this is being released, the 17, just to your Crest Club, and just now. So
yeah, that's correct.
That's great. That's exciting. It tastes great. It is hearty. It is big, but we have some library wines too in the mix today, which give a promise of a future. So what are we tasting what do you guys have open special tonight? For my birthday,
okay. I'll jump back over to the second LaCole wine. Although I really like the 16 a lot, but I am also tasting, not drinking yet, the Perigee 2008, Seven Hills Vineyard. Younger vines, obviously, but not too much younger. So again, one of the things that I love so much about doing things like this is the tasting of the wines from the same place. So you're able to kind of watch and taste what has developed as the vines have gotten older, even though the lots might be slightly different from one vintage to another, they're still in that same place. And I believe that the style, the typicity of the fruit comes through because it's in a place where it grows and it captures that. So again, I get the little cedar notes, and I like the maturity on the 08 a lot. It's just, for me right now, it's kind of right in its wheelhouse, but I know it's got a long time to go yet as well. So Marty, I'd like to hear a little bit more about it from the production and the grape growing side of it, but it's brilliant. So well done. Well done.
Yeah. Well, it's ironically pretty similar in terms of the blend to the 2016. I think we had, by the time we got to 08, we had kind of settled in on something, you know, within a narrow range. We do vary the percentages a little bit because, like, in a cool year, we might use a little bit more of the earlier ripening varieties like Merlot in the blend. And in a warm year, we might use a little bit more of the later ripening varieties. And Seven Hills is, being a warm site, you know, we tend to have the other Bordeaux varieties, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec, really get nice and ripe. And they really, when you get a riper year, in 2008 really kind of fit that pattern. They really add a lot to the blend. So that was, you know, we've now, at least for a decade, we've been trying to use a little bit higher percentage of those other Bordeaux varieties in the blend. And I just remember 08 being really a very, you know, it was right out of the gate, it was very popular, just had the nice aromatic lift on the wine, and it has aged very well. And I think many Walla Walla wines have done so. That tends to have that little savory herbal note to it, but just quite delicious.
Speaking of aromatics, the other wine that you've got open, Marty.
Yes, while I'm talking, so the reason Constance raised her glass is because we sat down this afternoon and on her birthday tasted the Woodward Canyon 2005 Woodward Canyon Estate together.
Fantastic.
And so we were both really taken away by how explosive the aromatics were on this wine, how it looked classic Bordelaise, that cigar box, black cherry, sweet leather. It is just downright delicious, Rick. Congratulations on this one.
Yeah, well, thanks, Marty. One thing that I would say about this wine, as I said a little bit earlier, both of these wines stylistically are right bank wines. Now, the first wine that we talked about, I would say would be more a little bit, because it's Cabernet Franc driven, it's got more Cab Franc in it and some Cab Sauv, but it would be a little bit more what I would consider to be a Saint-Emilion right bank style. Whereas the wine you guys have over there right now, the 2005, that is more of a Pomerol based wine, I think. It's got that Merlot. And as you know, Marty, Merlot in Washington and in Walla Walla, especially the clone we had, is it's a pretty sturdy clone, and it tends to throw a lot of tannin, or can. And so I think it took us here at Woodward a while to learn how to manage the tannin in our Merlot. We've subsequently planted a couple of different clones and on some rootstock and some other things. But this wine, again, kind of coming back to the vintage, and what I completely concur with what you said about the different blends changing as the vintage has changed, because it has to. If it's your estate wine for that or whatever, it has to reflect as best you can. What we try to do with our estate reserve is we have it try to be our finest effort from our estate vineyard. And if it has to be from a cooler vintage slightly, so Merlot dominant, so be it. The Cabernet takes a back seat, the Cabernet Franc takes a back seat, and maybe a little Petit Verdot comes in just to give it a little bit of backbone and a little bit of spine or something like that. But I just love doing blends because, and I know Kevin, our winemaker, does as well, because it gives you so much more freedom and to try to craft the absolute finest wine you can. Obviously, as I said before, the reason I make wine is so I can enjoy it with my best friends and around the table and have it with wonderful food. And, so,
you know, Rick, it just made me think of something. When you're making a wine reflective of a site's unique terroir, soil aspect, and all that, having the toolbox of having these different varieties every year gives you a little more flexibility to really eke out the best quality. And I know we feel that way about when we're doing the single vineyard, Seven Hills Perigee or Ferguson or Pepperbridge Apogee, having that flexibility really allows us to make the best red from that particular site each year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Marty.
Do you mind, Jordan? I'm gonna jump in with the next question if that's okay. And I was going to ask about both the vineyards the estate vineyards of both wineries are certified sustainable, and it's important to us and to Woodward Canyon. But Rick was very instrumental in sort of the roots of that movement here, and it would be great to hear what you were thinking at that time and how it all came to be.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the whole sustainable movement in Walla Walla was an important one. And, clearly I was just one part of it. So I don't want to misrepresent all the other players that were involved. There was a very small group of people. At one point, though, it represented close to 80% of all the wine grapes grown in Walla Walla Valley at the time. But in 2004, this small group of winemakers and growers got together, and it was kind of the usual suspects. So it was Leonetti and Pepperbridge and McColl and Woodward and a couple of others, and then a couple of other smaller vineyards. And basically caught the idea that, and this was the first effort in Washington State, at least, to try to take and make our vineyards a sustainable movement. Now, Walla Walla is unique in the sense that we are Oregon and Washington appellation. So how we were able to do it was we formed a small organization called Vinea, but we were able to secure third-party certification through live certification out of Oregon. And because we were a multi-state appellation, we were able to make that work. And so again, starting in 2004, that's going back over 15 years. I went back in my records to see when our first audit was for certification. You keep records and keep track of all of your inputs and all of your things you're using, how many sprays you do or whatever like that. And our first audit was in 2006, which is like 15 years coming on this year. So, but what the thing about sustainable agriculture, and it doesn't just reflect in agriculture, but if you're a sustainable company or a sustainable business, I like to use the analogy of a three-legged stool. And that's not my idea, but it's another person's idea, but it seems to make sense. If you rip away one leg of the stool, you really don't have a successful company. And those three legs are social sustainability, economic sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And they're all equally valuable. I mean, you've got to take care of your people and provide for them, and you got to be a good neighbor. And so that kind of is part of the social side of it. I mean, we've tried to limit all of our synthetic inputs to the absolute minimum that we can. And so we're doing everything we can to nudge as close as we can to organic agriculture, not necessarily biodynamic, but we're pretty close. Certain vintages, we almost don't use any synthetics at all. And we're very, very proud of that. But also the economic side, and you can talk about that even in the times we're in right now. You've still got to have a company or a business that's sustainable financially. And so that means, yes, you're going to do X, Y, and Z in your vineyard from an environmental point of view, and you're going to take care of your employees and your team and all of that, and all of your winemaking staff. But at the end of the day, you still got to make a profit, because you have to stay in business and none of the other parts of it function. And so I think the thing that my big takeaway is with sustainability as far as it relates to Walla Walla and Walla Walla grape growing and vineyards is what I started to see after we did it, and it took time to see it, but it basically means as you enhance the soil and you put in that you're using more natural products, you're tilling less, you're trying to conserve fuel, making less passes, but you're improving the soil this whole period of time. And when the soil gets better and gets more vitality, and I'm very proud to say that Sager, our son, has really embraced this whole concept. And so he's kind of managing our vineyard now, and he's just absolutely into this. And so it's really cool to see that. But as the soil improves, the grapes get better, And then as a result of that, the wines get better. And as I said the other day to you guys when we were all talking, I think the sustainable fruit, the sustainable grapes and wine that come from Walla Walla Valley, they just jump. They have a little bit more aromatics and a little bit more lift. And I can say for sure from Woodward Canyon, from the time we grew grapes in the early years until we became certified sustainable, that our wines have definitely gotten better. Now, you might argue that the grapes are older and the roots are deeper, and so and the winemaker is older. So maybe there's a little bit of that, but the fact that we've embraced sustainable agriculture is I think, a huge reason why the wines in Walla Walla are so impressive. And lastly, it's just the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll echo Rick's comment. This has been a Walla Walla team effort. Rick really was, as you can tell, a passionate believer in helping put this program together. But Jean-Francois Pele and Norman Kevin at Pepper Bridge and Leonetti and just a number of programs have helped all of us get to the level. We are also certified sustainable and certified salmon safe at both Seven Hills Vineyard and Ferguson.
Yeah, great.
So yeah, Marty, kind of talking about the whole team effort thing. I know that we're really lucky here in Walla Walla to have an enology and viticulture program as part of our community college. And can you tell us a little bit about how that program got started and its impact on the industry?
Sure. Well, actually, that's a great question. Walla Walla has had a number of things that have happened that have helped Walla Walla get better and share with other wineries getting better. One of those was the creation of the Walla Walla Valley Wine Alliance, which helps all of us market and sell our fruit and do joint marketing programs. But the community college program is something that I was very much right in the middle of when it all happened because Steve Van Osdell, the then current president of the Walla Walla Community College, had asked me to serve on the foundation of the college. And I was president of the foundation in the late 90s when this idea of creating an enology and viticulture program came up. And Steve Van Osdell was very passionate about it. And Miles Anderson, who was one of the founders of Walla Walla Vintners, was also very involved in the community college. And Miles became we created this program and operated it a couple years. I did a lot of wine industry arm twisting to help raise money for the program. But at the end of the day, they built a facility in the early 2000s. And Miles and Stan Clark, who, if you're in the industry and know Stan Clark, he was an amazing character. But this all began to churn out 30, 35 students a year. And I'm telling you, this program was so top notch that they were the envy of some universities up and down the West Coast on how quality this program is. And today, the director is Tim Donahue, and he has an incredible staff. We just recently hired Marcus Raffinelli from that staff to join our winemaking team. And I've seen the caliber and quality of the students now all over the industry coming out of the Walla Walla Community College, and it has ratcheted up the quality inputs of what we're doing, not just in Walla Walla, but in a lot of wineries across Washington State. So we had to bring that up because it's made a big difference in taking Walla Walla to a new level.
No, I would totally concur with that. And in fact, when our son came back from his career in culinary in Seattle, and he joined our team again, he attended the community college as well. And it was just the perfect thing. Just the perfect extra education for him. Loved it.
Cool. Well, I wanted to, you guys, everyone can see that Rick and Marty are friends, and they're also friendly competitors. But in a lot of markets, we go to market through the same distributor or same importer agent. So they end up getting to do, and I actually was traveling to certain states with Jordan this year. So we all get to go to the market together too, which is awesome. A lot of you are saying Walla Walla is such a special place. It's your happy place. It is a special place. It is a happy place where people can be participating in the same industry, but be very supportive of each other. But we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the places where you guys have shared agents together, importers and such. And I think we have a photo to share, a really beautiful start to some. So that's Woodward Canyon behind you. You guys know that. It's the vintage house. And there's Marty and Rick there, as well as Joanna Dunham there, right?
Yes.
And Sager, I see Sager there. But so that's our Japanese importer, Orca. You guys want to talk to us about this
Sure.
market in particular?
Yeah, one of the things that our Orca International does that is special is every year, probably not this year, but every year, typically, they will bring a small little group of select buyers. A lot of them are on premise, and not all, but some are very small, and some are quite prestigious, large, like Marriott or hotel chains or something like that. But the point is, it's one of the best business models of how to be an export company that I've ever seen. And I just love the fact that McColl and Woodward happen to both be with this great importer. But he's also a friend, originally from Washington State. So I think he understands. He does Oregon and Washington wine. And honestly, he and his staff, his team have just been incredible people, and have just done a marvelous job of getting wines from LaCole and Woodward Canyon placed in not just Japanese restaurants or American food restaurants where they're big, but in the really good ones, the best ones. And it's just fantastic to be able to go over. So anyway, whenever it's our turn, we always fight at Woodward Canyon to see who makes the trip to Japan. And it turns out that Darcy and I typically now are on about a three-year rotation, or a 2-year rotation anyway. Kevin goes. We had to cancel this year, of course. Kevin also was on the trip that ended up having the big Fukushima, the earthquake and that. So he and Jamie Kim had to come.
But you were all together in Japan this past year in 2018, correct? Or 19?
Yeah, it was 20th anniversary. Yeah, for Orca.
Yeah, so the 20th anniversary in Japan of a successful business is a big deal. And so Rick and Darcy and Megan and I all trekked over, and we had a great time traveling with one another, and two, not just seeing the sights. The upper right-hand picture is a tempura restaurant in Tokyo that was written up in the New York Times and the Wine Spectator as one of the best restaurants in Tokyo. So we went, and lo and behold, they had both of our wines on the list, which was really fun.
It was wonderful. Yeah. 2 different wines of each of ours on the list, even white and red, I think. Anyway.
I have to say the ladies wear those kimonos just a little bit better than you guys. Those are some nice kimonos.
You had to do the dress.
It's beautiful. You guys are both LaCole and Woodward Canyon are multi-generational, small family-owned, operated businesses. Rick, can you talk about what's exciting about having a family-run, family-operated small business?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, honestly, Constance. We it's like I like to think of it, Darcy and I talked about this, but when the kids both were in high school and thinking about college and where to go and what they were going to do, after they were away for a while, they were in college, we didn't really encourage them right away to try to return. I think that we both agreed that it was going to be beneficial for Jordan and Sager to get perspective and learn from other people, work for other people, see different philosophies of how you run a business, and find out what you like to do and what you don't like to do. And so I think I'm very, very pleased both with what Jordan has been doing, and especially right now, especially during the kind of times that we're in, because we're in a grinder right now. And to see both kids jump in and bust it and really work as hard as they are, totally impressive. I'm so proud, so proud. It's awesome. So anyway, you know, but 10 years away, I totally believe that their time away working in other disciplines and for other people, good bosses, not such good bosses, but it teaches you a lot about how you want to run a company and how you want to treat people and how you want to, it gives you perspective, as I said. So yeah. I wouldn't have changed that for a minute. I think Darcy would agree with me on that. Their time was well spent by being away.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Jordan and Sager represent your second generation, and they're already quite activated. And Marty is actually the second generation at Lake Hole, but trying to get lined up for the third generation as well.
Yeah, I think I was maybe, I used to say I was the second generation, but then I realized Scott Williams at Kiona probably beat me to the punch on that one. So, but we were early second generation, in part because Gene and Baker, when they started Lake Hole, not only were they early in the wine business, but they were a bit older. And this picture is my daughter, of course, my wife, Megan, and my daughter, Rebecca, my son, Riley. They've all worked in the business. Riley spent some time working at Seven Hills Vineyard, and then he worked Harvest a few years and became traveling around the world doing winemaking. And today he's involved in an entrepreneurial startup company that's providing software for farm labor compliance. And Rebecca worked both in sales and as an office manager at the winery, but fell in love with her husband, Sander, and they now live in Aspen. And I think we're going to go see them pretty soon because we have a new grandchild.
That's wonderful. Awesome.
Yeah, so we had some beautiful questions coming in, and some of them, I kind of wrote that down. Andy was asking about, will Woodward and Lake Hole do any collaborations beyond this phone Zoom? do we think of ever doing a collaboration?
I'll just speak to that. Rick and I have, because we showed you the Japanese deal, but we actually have the same distributor in London and several other markets, and we end up collaborating. And because we're neighbors and so close, it's something fun to do, and I think people enjoy it. So I think we're definitely in tune with doing it. But this actually, the current circumstances that we're in with you know, the tasting rooms being closed, allowed us to come up with this idea of doing this online. And so I suspect that we will be doing more of this kind of thing together.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree with that 100%.
And Jason had asked about how to store properly the wines if he doesn't have a cellar, if he's not able to do 100% cellar conditions.
If you don't have a cellar? He
doesn't have a cellar, but how would you recommend that he store the wines?
I'll take that one, because when I first met Darcy, we didn't have a cellar, and what I did is I stored wine. Well, it depends on how much wine you have, first of all. So, yes. But if you don't have a cellar, hopefully you have a basement, and fingers crossed that you have a basement. But if you don't have a basement, then the best place to store your wine is at the bottom of a closet, as dark and as calm as you can have it be. And I guess that's where we stored our wine in the early days before we had a cellar or a basement. But and pick your coolest closet. You can find these little, very inexpensive little thermometers, and that are actually set up so they're positive and negative. So we use them in the vineyards quite a bit to check the warmest temperatures and the coolest temperatures. But you could get something similar and put it in the bottom of your closet, yeah, and track the temperatures down there to see what it is. But if you keep the door closed and maybe put a little insulation around it, put your wine down there.
Yeah, both
your shoes, but
Andy and Lauren seem to have the same recommendation as you. So Andy and Lauren, gold star, because you answered Jason on the fly, and Rick answered this with the same advice. So that's good. Well done.
Cool.
Did you spot any other questions, Jordan, that you want to throw into the mix?
I think some of them kind of got answered as people were going back and forth, which is kind of fun to see. So
a lot of people are asking about adjusting in this situation of the COVID, of the closure of the tasting rooms and such. I guess it's quite the elephant in the room, as much as we might not want to think about it at every minute. But I guess, Jordan, maybe Marty, we want to jump in and talk about the calibrating, what it's done to us and what we're doing to deal with that.
I think both Lacole and Woodward Canyon are well-placed in the on-premise or restaurant world. And of course, that is completely dead at the moment. And that part of the distribution world is struggling because nobody's buying any wine. The good news is retail is doing pretty well, but it's really not retail for, the more expensive wines. But the good news is, despite our tasting rooms being closed, we're seeing strong interest, consumer direct buying, and that is really helping our small businesses, quite frankly, a lot. So thank you. I think I bet a number of you on this Zoom are buying wine direct from wineries. We appreciate that. It's really a big help. But I can tell you, we are both enduring wineries. We will get through this. We're just basically facing a little bit of a slowdown, and it'll be a build out because it'll take a while for those restaurants to come back and play. But people enjoy their good wine, and both Woodward Canyon and Lacole are making good wine. So we're definitely going to do well.
No, I would echo that as well, Marty. I know Jordan's kind of seen some interesting numbers, and we were tracking our budget compared to what we were expecting, and we weren't that far off of what our goal was for April, and Jordan could elaborate perhaps more on it. But again, I would echo what Marty said as well about thank you so much for believing in purchasing the wine directly from us. We know there's a lot of places where you can go to buy it, but we appreciate it. And as two small family businesses, that's like our lifeblood, and especially right now. And so we very much appreciate it, but we will come out of it on the other side. I think it's going to be a different market, and it's going to be different. I'd like to think it was going to be a V-shaped recovery, but I'm more skeptical of that now, and I think it's going to take longer and than I originally thought. So, but I have two beautiful glasses of Lacole Perigee right in front of me right now, and so
life is good.
I know we're going to come out of this on the other side, and like what they always say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And so we'll do this. We will do this.
And we'll be here when the dust settles. That's for sure. Lacole and Woodward next to each other out here, a perfect place to spend an afternoon or a morning of wine tasting. I wanted to thank, I don't have any other questions. I know someone was mentioning Kobe beef goes great with Walla Walla cab. Yes, that's true. And that makes me want to go eat. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining and participating. Jordan, before we wrap up, anything you wanted to jump in about?
No, same thing. We really appreciate it. We've been receiving so many nice emails from our customers, and you guys mean a lot to us, and it really inspires us to keep chugging along, and it's been really fun to be with all of you tonight. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you as soon as possible in Walla Walla again.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's good. We've covered it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you everybody for jumping in. I still, one of the measures of whether you were a success is how many people did you lose over the course of an hour? And I'm seeing a lot of people still online. So
thank you.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, keep an eye on your inboxes, both Woodward to their Crest Club and we to our Vin de l'École Club. We're going to be sending a follow-up email to all of you all with some surprises in there. So keep an eye on your inbox in the next couple days. And, we're hoping to share some love between both wineries. So it'll be worth your while to open that email. We've really enjoyed working on that this week together, and having an audience makes it possible. So,
well, I'd like to say thank you to Constance and Jordan, because Jordan and Constance both were going back and forth a lot. So to the two of you, you are the ones that made this, and I'd just like to say thank you.
And
so
Darcy.
much. Darcy
and
as
Darcy.
well. So thank you all to the ladies.
Cheers
thank
and
you
happy
so
birthday, Constance.
And Marta. And
yes.
Marta. And
Happy
thank
birthday,
you guys.
Constance.
Thank you.
Safe travels,
Cheers.
Marty.
Yes, safe travels. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a great weekend.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Thank you, Les. Those are nice commentary. Thank you, Les, if you're still there. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Steve. Take it easy, guys. Hey, Michael. Hi, MQ.
Happy birthday, Constance.
Oh, thank you.
That's
Good
great
to see you.
inception. How are you guys celebrating tonight?
I'm gonna have a glass of wine and do some gardening, hopefully.
It's perfect that you did the session today. I'll
Yeah,
leave
wasn't
you with
it?
your friends. Thanks for inviting me. That was
Take
special.
care. Yeah, good. All right, take care, Michael.
We'll talk some other time.
Hang in there.
Bye, you too.
Bye.
A couple at the top right.
Are we still muted, or we have an open
You
mic?
just unmuted it.
Anybody can unmute themselves now. Thank you, Marta.